Well, we're gonna try this again. I had this first one ready to go, and I don't know why my tablet will not stay on. So we're gonna try this again. I'm gonna try and use my phone this time and see if we can get through this. I had about 15 minutes of video and it just quit, and I don't know where it quit. So we were talking about metacognition, about thinking about your thinking. We're going on now, we're going to move on here as how that affects comprehension. The children who can think about their thinking can also articulate the problems they have comprehending and discuss how those problems might be solved. There is always a problem with this if the kids don't own the strategy. Children's listening comprehension is always much higher until they get their reading comprehension up there. One of the issues here is that young children do not have the ability to have that little voice reading with them, which might not believe this, but does help with your comprehension. We have to keep this going. We have to keep these kids going. They have to be able to tell you what they're not comprehending, but we have to give them the strategies in order to get them to help them comprehend, which is where we're going today. Although we teach children to use strategies, we don't teach them to be strategic readers. I cannot emphasize this enough. We teach them strategies and we move on. We have to stop doing that. We have to get these kids to the point where they own the strategies. They have to own these strategies so they can use them when they need them. Strategic readers can decide which approach is appropriate, but only if they own the strategy to start with. If we're not giving them ownership of the strategies and teaching them well, they're not going to own the strategy. If they don't own the strategy, there goes the comprehension, because they don't know what to do when the comprehension breaks down. Strategic readers can decide which approach is appropriate to use and can employ multiple strategies together. They have to be able to use multiple strategies, but the only way they can use multiple strategies is if we teach them those strategies first. The ultimate goal for reading instruction and constructing meaning from constructing meaning from text. If your children are not comprehending what they're reading, they are simply calling the words or barking at the print. They're not getting it. When a parent of a first grader says, "Well, my kid can read the newspaper." Well, are they reading or are they just reading? Are they comprehending or are they just calling the words? Chances are very good they're just calling the words. But you don't want to blow the parents' puffed up chest out of alignment. So say, well, that's nice. When getting meaning from text, children are expected to have competence in self-monitoring and self-correcting strategies. Self-correcting and self-monitoring goes with metacognition, thinking about your thinking, number one. And number two, it goes with the strategies that have to be taught to these students so they own them. You have to get these kids to own these strategies, and I can't emphasize that enough. You can't just hit a strategy and move on. You have to get them to own them so they know what to do when you aren't there to help them. This is prime example time right now. Some of these children are educating their parents as the parents are desperately trying to homeschool them. They're able to discuss how they figured out the meaning and what strategies they use. The only way they can do that is if they really understand the strategy. They have to understand the strategy. I'm hoping that my sound is up enough on this. I'm already using antiquated equipment, and now my tablet, which is up I just got it at Christmas time, is pooping out on me. So, oy vey. These children also raise questions about what the author is saying. This is a strategy called questioning the author. This is a strategy that we will work with in the next class, but this is an important thing. Why is the author saying this? Why is the author doing this? Why did the story end this way? What do you think the author meant when he or she said this? They need to be able to do that. The only way they can do that is if they are really comprehending what they're reading, and then they can take their metacognition and move it to another level. Each day in each class there should be a lesson based on standards and your school curriculum dealing with comprehension every day in every class, not just reading. We need to take things across the curriculum, purposefully integrate as appropriate whatever skill you are emphasizing into science, social studies, math, play, music, and art. Not just in reading language arts. We have to take it across the curriculum so our students can get what they need. These strategies, we use the same strategy in whatever day we're using in science and social studies and math. That gives them ownership. This tells you right here that every teacher in every school building, regardless of content, is a reading teacher. They don't think they are. I teach math. Yeah, well, your kids don't read in math? Of course they do. They read word problems. They read story problems. They read graphs. They read charts. Social studies, they read maps. Science, they read experiments. They read problems. We have to be purposefully teaching reading in every class. Literacy instruction must happen all day long if children are to become fluent readers by the end of 3rd grade. And this is not just in 1st and 2nd grade. If you are a 1st and 2nd grade teacher, you are going to be teaching literacy and mathematics all day in one way, shape, or form. It has to be that way in every class. You have to emphasize those literacy strategies. Students who are not reading on grade level, we've talked about this. By the end of 3rd grade, will likely never reach grade level and are at risk of dropping out of school. We are looking at this constantly. If you see at the bottom, that's our big Maine Coon Tuffy. He just got shaved because he had so many knots in his coat, and he's very interested in what's going on over here. We need to select narrative and informational text that is well structured. Now, I want to stop right here. Narrative and informational. Narrative tells a story. Informational gives you, obviously, information. So you have narrative and expository text. We need to do what is called twin texting with our narrative and informational text. Twin texting is, for instance, if you are reading Charlotte's Web as a chapter book to your 2nd graders, you need to couple that with expository text on farms, spiders, pigs, country living, county fairs, whatever. We have to pull those two pieces together because the strategies are very different, and we have to teach those kids how to find the difference. Narrative or literature contains clearly delineated setting, themes, episodes, and resolutions, while expository and informational presents nonfiction content area information to children in the following structures. Now, these are text structures that we will get to in the next class, but these are so very important for expository text reading because the children have to understand what the text structure is to know which strategies to use. And the text structures there: description, sequencing, comparing and contrasting, cause and effect, problem solution, and exemplification. And we'll get to a lot more of that in the next class. Reading workshop. Perhaps you've seen some of your teachers use reading workshop. I don't know. Reading workshop is an organizational structure that can be used with expository text. in which the children have a mini lesson in comprehension that often starts with the teacher doing a read aloud to introduce the skill. This is so very important. You do these mini lessons and then you teach the reading lesson. These mini lessons introduce the students to whatever it is you are doing. And then you go on with the lesson so they can use what you've been teaching them. The directed listening or the directed reading thinking activity. There's a video, a couple videos up on Facebook that will, or not Facebook, on Blackboard to go with this. This is a strategy that is used when a book's being read by the child for the first time. Remember, you never let the kids read out loud to each other or whatever unless they're reading to themselves. You never let anybody read cold in front of a bunch of people. Key component of this strategy involves setting the purpose for reading. Before we go to purpose setting, I'm going to go back up here just for a moment. We talked about that little inner voice that reads with you. Until children develop that little inner voice, which is usually about the end of first grade or second grade, they cannot read silently to themselves. You go to a first grade room and a teacher says, okay, read this to yourself, and you hear a bunch of mumbling and blah, 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 and then teacher says, shh, to yourself. They can't. They're doing the best they can because they don't have that little voice reading with them. It's only once that voice is developed that they can actually read that text to themselves. A key component of the strategy is setting a purpose. This is so very important no matter what you're teaching. You set your purpose. Why are you teaching this lesson? There has to be a reason. There has to be a purpose. The kids need to know what that purpose is. They need to know what the reason that they're doing something. Knowing the purpose in advance will help direct students' thoughts and give them a sense of how to approach the reading. It will also tell them which strategy they need to be using. You set that purpose. If you're just teaching a lesson because it's the next one in the book, that's not a reason to teach the lesson. There has to be a purpose. There has to be a reason. There are many different objectives in using the DRTA or the DLTA, but the framework is always the same. You prepare for reading with pre-questions and discussion. This activates their background knowledge. It gets them thinking about their thinking to their metacognition. You have the children read the story or listen to the teacher read it to them, and then you discuss the story. That's where you dig deep to find out where they're coming from with their comprehension. Are they really understanding? In addition to receiving formal instruction on skills that foster comprehension, students also need to have multiple types of reading experiences. This is called wide reading. Individual reading is important as our collective reading and collaborative reading taken together. They convey that reading is a personal as well as a social pursuit. That's all well and good, but we also need to get them reading widely. They need to read across genres. They need to read across authors. They need to read narrative. They need to read expository. Some kids get stuck in a rut and they only want to read a certain author. That's okay, but they need to supplement with other authors because different authors use different vocabulary. They use different sentence structures. They use different story structures. We have to get them reading widely. I'm going to stop right here because I don't know how much my phone will take. So we will start the next one with read alouds.